Record. Okay, everybody sounds good. Everybody's good.
Yep.
Okay, cool. All right, so here we go. Welcome to the first episode of the Talk Sox podcast. My name is Alex, and I'm here today with my good friends Adam and Maddie.
Hey, I'm Adam.
I'm Maddie. I'm super excited to be here with Adam and Alex today.
Yeah, when we were kind of approached about this, like a month ago or so now,
Mhm.
it really we were all three of us were super excited, and then I think with the holidays and everything kind of happening, it got kind of pushed to the back burner until last week. And now that we are in the Juan Soto sweepstakes, we thought that it would be the best time to go ahead and start with our first episode.
Yeah, definitely. And a week away from winter meetings, so it's, ramping up and time to get excited, I guess.
Yeah, I think
I'm not going
so.
to say full throttle or anything, but
That
maybe.
though that's not allowed here. Those are banned words at this point.
If you would have said that the Red Sox are in the heat of the Juan Soto stakes, I would have laughed in your face. If just where we are now, and it's just crazy to think that ownership seems to be willing to spend now.
Seems to be that's key. Yeah.
Yeah, that has not been the case a lot of the time. And, I guess we were prepared for it a little bit last offseason, but the fact that they are fact that I think more people are prognosticating that they will be spending this offseason is interesting because honestly, I thought that we'd be more of a uh, trade,
Mm-hmm.
trade some people and get people back than a diving into free agent um, see kind of thing. But, I could be proven wrong, I guess.
I didn't expect us to play in the free agent market, at least to the level that we're rumored to be playing right now. I thought that it would be very trade heavy, especially since we still have all of the prospects that Heim kind of stockpiled, and we have two areas that we can really trade from. But hearing what seems to be a commitment to spending, I think is probably the best sign that we as Red Sox fans can take from this, because I think it now proves that ownership and Craig Breslow are incredibly serious about trying to bring a World Series back to Boston.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, with the type of money that they're talking about with Juan Soto, I wonder what that means for the rest of the roster as far as, you know, I mean, I know Tyler O'Neill probably isn't coming back, especially if they get Juan Soto, but at that point, it's sort of like, well, how do we shuffle the team around to, you know, accommodate
Absolutely.
generational talent?
There are definitely some roster questions that come along with bringing Soto on board. And I know, I'm sure you all have seen it too over the past few weeks. The big argument against it on Red Sox Twitter and Blue Sky is that, well, he's left handed. And so is everybody else who hits for the Red Sox. And I don't care. If it's Juan Soto, does not bother me one bit.
Yeah, I think like from the early days when you first heard that Juan Soto was like, his biggest comp was Ted Williams. It was always kind of like, okay, that'd be fun to have, the closest thing to Ted Williams since Ted Williams on the Red Sox, and it
Right.
never seemed possible. But with his on base percentage, it doesn't really matter what
His
hand.
splits are
Uh,
perfect for lefties and righties at this point.
He has the ability to lead the league in doubles, just based on his spray chart and the Green Monster.
I salivate thinking about him taking aim at the Green Monster every home game. Like that makes me so excited.
Him with before Devers and then Casas would terrorize the league.
Oh,
It's
absolutely.
just so exhilarating to think about.
So, did you all see the Randy Miller through Tyler Milliken report that the Red Sox have emerged as a favorite or maybe the favorite for Soto?
I honestly don't know who to trust anymore on the internet. There's so many
Yeah.
reports conflicting, and Ed Hand said the Miller dude from, is it SNY, or
Yes.
whatever,
Yeah.
he equated him to John Tomase.
Okay.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So do with that as you will. It could be for clickbait, which seems to be a lot of the
That's the
media's
trend
MO
since
now.
Thanksgiving.
Yeah. And I mean, even Tyler Milliken, who retweeted that about the Red Sox emerging as favorites. I mean, almost immediately after that, he quoted Jack Curry from the Yes Network
Hmm.
saying that the Yankees have had several productive conversations with Juan Soto and they feel very comfortable with where they are in the process and et cetera, kind of thing. So it's essentially just first you hear about, you know, the Red Sox, then you hear about the Yankees, and then I'm sure we're going to hear about the Blue Jays or someone else, putting a good foot
Absolutely.
forward kind of thing. So, I mean, it's until it actually happens, I don't think you're going to know who is actually in front.
Absolutely. There's two people, and maybe Soto's family can be included in that, who knows what's going on, and that's Juan Soto and Scott Boras.
Yeah.
What kind of stood out to me about that tweet, was that they apparently told him in the meeting that they intend to sign two additional big money free agents, a bat and a pitcher. Do you guys want to spitball who those may be?
Yeah. I mean,
Max Fried.
I think Freed makes the most sense.
doesn't that has to be that's like the only big money pitcher I think that the Red Sox would really splurge on at this point.
I
Well,
wouldn't put Sean Manaea or Jack Flaherty in the big free agent category. I think
yeah,
that
I was gonna say
they're upper tier two, definitely.
maybe Flaherty because of the World Series, win
He's
and
right on
performance
that
down the
border.
stretch. Like maybe they would consider that a big name free agent to spend money on, but it's not. I mean, Snell would have been the obvious guy. Snell
Absolutely.
would have been the actual like big money free agent pitcher to spend money on. Unless they're considering, Roki Sasaki, they're not going to spend a lot of money on him. But unless they, for some reason, are banking on getting him, like, that would be a big free agent.
Oh, absolutely. And there were some ties over the weekend between Sasaki and the Red Sox. I think kind of everybody believes that he's bound for the West Coast, whether that be the Dodgers or the Padres or maybe even the Giants. But I mean, realistically, everybody's coming in with the same offer. And if the Red Sox do sign Juan Soto, I don't know if there's a more desirable team to join to try to counteract what the Dodgers are doing out in LA.
Yeah, I just think that's going to be, it's like, you have to assume he's going to LA until, he
Oh,
says
absolutely. Yeah. And just kind of rumblings and stuff. It doesn't seem like Masataka Yoshida is happy in Boston. So I don't know if that's going to play favorably for Sasaki either.
I mean, I don't know if I've heard those rumblings from, Yoshida's side. I mean, I thought it was just Red Sox fans tend to think like we can get rid of this guy
Absolutely.
because we need to fill that spot with, someone, Devers or
Right. I know that
someone.
there was some complaining with the injury, and he felt that maybe the Red Sox weren't taking him as seriously as he thought that they should. And then I think that's probably where they snowballed from. And then they really like he was on the IL for so long that I think people started to maybe build a little more into it than what it probably was.
Yeah, because he didn't have a bad end of the season. Like,
No, he really came on there at the end of the season.
by the end, you were kind of like, okay, well, I could see us moving on with this guy next year. Like that doesn't seem to be like that bad of a bat to have. I mean, he doesn't hit for the power that you would want out of a DH spot, but if he's, getting on base at a decent clip, you could live with it. But
I think the power could show up going into this year. It seems that it takes, especially hitters, with the exception of Ichiro, it seems that it takes the Japanese hitters a couple to 3 seasons to really acclimate themselves to the MLB. And having a very shortened season because of the IL stint maybe we were going to see Massa turn that corner this year, and it just didn't happen until the very tail end and going into 2025 with a full spring training because he did end his first season hampered as well because he wasn't used to the grind of the MLB season. So maybe with a full off season which he's recovering from shoulder surgery, but a full off season to at least get ready to play baseball and then some sort of a spring training regiment. Maybe we see the version of Masataka Yoshida that we were promised going into that contract.
He also had the World Baseball Classic.
Absolutely. Yeah.
So that was an additional workload on top of a full MLB season. So
Yeah.
this next year, hopefully, as you said, he's locked in and ready to go.
I love Masataka Yoshida. I want him to stay on the Red Sox. I understand the push to trade him. I think that it does make some amount of sense if there are some moving pieces that we're going to talk about here in just a little bit. But for the most part, I think that that contract is virtually untradeable right now, unless you're willing to attach a top 10 prospect to it. And I don't know if there's any deal out there that makes sense to do that with Yoshida.
Yeah, it's going to end up being it would have to be a bad contract for a bad contract kind of thing, or like you're saying, like we eat a lot of the money to have him play for a
Mm-hmm.
different team kind of thing, or trade a prospect and get probably something that's not even that great back, you know?
Yeah.
So, in my opinion, you we should go into next year with him on the team, but you know, uh, I guess I'll leave it up to Craig Breslow and
Right. Unless we are spending money like it's going out of style, I don't see any way that Yoshida is not on this team next year. So we think that it's probably Max Fried. What about a free agent bat? Do you have any idea who they might be thinking in that regard? Or is there anybody that jumps out to you?
You got anyone on the mind, Maddie?
I
Uh, Teoscar Hernandez is the obvious candidate, but if they would sign Juan Soto and retain Masataka Yoshida, I just don't see how he would fit in the lineup
yeah.
because he doesn't play the field every day, right? He's a so he splits age and occasionally playing what was it
Yeah.
left field at Dodger Stadium. So I'm not sure about the bat.
Yeah, it's so hard for me to even think about where you put a bat in this lineup at this point, if not like, you know, there's second base and there's maybe left field. Those are like the
Mm-hmm.
two possible positions that you have. And so if you're telling Juan Soto you'll sign him, I'm assuming that's going to fill left field. And then second base, I mean, maybe you try Willie Adames and like, see if you can move him over or put Trevor Story there. Again, we're hoping Trevor Story is healthy, but
Yeah.
it's with the amount of prospects we have, and it's sort of hard to imagine the whole free agent signing thing.
Yeah.
We were saying at the beginning, it just seems like there's just such a log jam that you kind of have to do some trades too, right? So like, I mean, maybe you sign a free agent that we're not thinking about, but it comes at the cost of probably trading, at least one major league piece and then probably a couple prospects as well.
The kind of the way I see it is I don't think there's any way that we can talk trade for anybody that doesn't include somebody probably in the top 10 of the prospect rankings, no matter who it is, whether it be Garrett Crochet or whatever other trade we can dream up. I think we've got to start dealing from our biggest resources and outfield at the major league level and at the minors, and then up the middle at the minors is log jammed like crazy. And if we go into 2025 with this log jam at both positions still occurring, I feel that we've left probably a lot of wins on the table.
Yeah, and I mean, and I hate to kind of like drudge up old stuff, but it just it reminds me of, like Blake Swihart and like
Yep.
like all these prospects from years past where we just like held on to them forever
Uh-huh.
until, I mean, with Swihart, we ended up just releasing him, I'm pretty sure. But like
Yeah, he
just it's just
he
like
kind of
all
dug
these,
his own grave.
yeah, but it's just all, you can't hold on to these guys forever. So I mean, I would probably prefer trading some of the prospects, since I would say like most of the guys who made their major league debut last year performed fairly well. So,
Mhm.
maybe you want to see them continue to grow at the major league level and trade from, the devil you don't know kind of thing. But I guess we'll see what happens.
Is there a member of the quote unquote big four that you are most comfortable trading? Is there, okay, we'll start here. Is there any of them that are completely untouchable? I want both of you on this one.
I'd say Kyle Teal. The team needs a catcher. Um, Connor Wong's defense is awful, and if they trade away their backup catcher, they're screwed in the sense that there aren't any decent catch. Well, no, Kyle Higashioka was just signed by the Rangers, so that's another catcher off the market, and I don't see any other major league teams willing to part ways with any of their catchers.
Unless we were
So
to bring back Danny Jansen, which I get it. I get the splits. I understand why they traded for him, but I don't know if that's the pat. If you're dead set on contending in 2025, is going into the season with Danny Jansen as your backup catcher or Reese McGuire. Both are free agents right now. Like, do we want either one of them back in the fold? So, do you think Teal breaks camp with the 40 man on the big league roster?
I think Craig Breslow said something how they want to let him continue develop in AAA for next year. So I don't think he'll be up at least by or until July.
Okay.
I mean, it's hard to imagine what they're going to do with the catching position, since essentially once Jansen came in, I mean, you saw Connor Wong playing a lot more of the field.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I mean, I know Alex Cora occasionally, threw Christian Vasquez out at like, different positions when, everyone was injured kind of thing. But it more just seemed like they wanted to keep Connor Wong's bat in the lineup, and they kind of were like, well, we don't really have a second baseman. So I guess,
Right. Who's
Connor, you want to
gonna
go do
is it
it?
gonna be Connor or Jamie Westbrook tonight?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So I mean, like when you look at it that way, it's kind of like, okay, so you clearly decided that he wasn't the kind of defensive catcher that you wanted every day going down the stretch last year. And now you're going to break camp with him being your number one catcher. Like, you either need to sign someone who's a very good defensive catcher and you're going to be, you know, rotating them in and out of that position, or, it's going to have to be Kyle Teal.
Do you think that Wong is a trade asset this offseason?
I think there's
Maybe at the sorry,
no, no, go ahead.
maybe at the trade deadline. Not now since they don't have any depth whatsoever.
Mm-hmm. Do you think that was part of rolling him out into the different positions, was to showcase to other teams, hey, like, yeah, he's a catcher first, he's a bat first catcher, but you can trade for him and he can slot in at second base if you need him?
For sure. He's also a pretty competent defender in the field.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, aside from his catching defense, he's made some snazzy plays at first and second.
Yeah.
I mean, I think he, whenever he was catching, anyways, everyone always kind of talked about how he's such a athletic catcher kind of thing, and he's
Not the typical catcher build.
right, and like he's fast for a catcher, all those kind of like things
Right.
that people say when someone is sort of like not shouldn't really be a catcher. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that he's definitely like a guy who reminds me probably a lot of Blake Swihart in that sense of
Hmm.
like catcher, but also like not really a catcher, except, the difference is that Connor Wong can actually hit and like is, constantly peppering the Green Monster with, so like maybe, you know, I think Maddie's probably right though. You're talking about like trade deadline, like someone needs a backup catcher and they don't really care if he can catch or not. They just need someone who,
Hmm.
can step in there last minute if, you need a defensive sub because you pinch ran for your catcher kind of thing.
Yeah.
So I think
And I
that's,
hate that that's the only, and I promise I'm not going to go off on a tangent about this, but that's the only remaining part of the Mookie Betts trade is Connor Wong. And that just kills me. And I'm at peace with Mookie being in LA. He seems much happier there. But the fact that the other two pieces played for the Yankees last year, um, and Jeter
I was
Downs
going
is
to say Jeter
just
Downs, did he actually
man.
play?
It, I mean, that's one of those flyers like you were just talking about, Adam. It's like all these prospects are never going to pan out, even the big four. For
Yeah.
as much as we want to hope and believe that they're the future of Red Sox baseball, realistically, one, maybe two of them are going to be everyday big league contributors.
Yeah. I mean, so going back to like your question of like who is maybe like most tradable, I think it's probably, I don't know, Marcelo Myers maybe.
That is 100% my vote, and I have a trade package ready to go.
Oh, okay.
I think now, keep in mind, I wrote about this in my You're the GM, although this is going to be a little tweaked. Um, I think that a deal that the Toronto Blue Jays cannot say no to is a deal of Marcelo Meyer and Triston Casas with probably David Sandlin for Vladimir Guerrero Jr.
Well, what are you going to do with Vladimir Guerrero Jr. if they're
First
talking about
base.
maybe moving Devers over? What are
You've
you
got
going to
to
do?
in this situation you have to trade Yoshida somewhere. And it's like I said in that You're the GM piece. Like if you're going to spend, let's spend. So eat some of that money to get rid of Yoshida. And Devers goes to his natural position, designated hitter.
Okay. I mean, I could see it, I guess. Um,
If you trade Devers, you're locked with a 300 plus $1 million DH for the next 9 years. It's basically the point of no return.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think
So
that
you
I think the way baseball is trending, though, that's going to be the case for most teams within the next 5 to 6 years, especially if the Dodgers keep spending the way that they're spending. Is that, and I mean, it's a universal DH at this point. You can't get around it. You're going to see these bat first kind of players start commanding, 250, $300 million contracts. And so to me, that's not as big of a deal with Devers because it one keeps him healthy. And while he makes decent plays at third, I don't think any of us are kidding ourselves when we say that Devers is the long term third baseman for the Boston Red Sox. And I think that a move to DH makes far more sense than moving him to first, a position that he's never played professionally. And I don't know if I trust learning first base on the fly in the majors.
I mean, you're talking about that, but they're talking about moving Devers into first, and
I think it's
Casas
a terrible idea.
Casas has played 9 games at third in the minors. So I mean,
Swap them,
just swap straight swap.
sign Bobby Dahlbeck back and let him come and play some third and first again.
Yeah, exactly. Another guy maybe we hung on to just a little bit too long.
Just a little bit. Yeah. If we had traded him after the COVID season, we could have had something special.
But yeah, I mean, isn't you don't think Vladimir Guerrero Jr. is uh, a DH eventually guy too?
I think that he can stick at first base far longer than Rafi will stick at third. And at that point, if you have that level of talent, you figure it out.
Okay. Okay.
Now, do I think they're going to do that? Absolutely not. But um, I wish that they would.
Yeah, I mean, if you're trading a big four, it has to be for pitching. I mean, if you said that, they were trading Marcelo Myers and getting Vladimir Guerrero Jr. and I, whoever is their worst starter right now or something, maybe I buy that. But it's just, there's no way that they trade one of those guys and not get a starter at least.
So that's an interesting conversation then. So do you think that and we could talk about any of the big four or even Triston Casas, do you think that if they're traded, it's guaranteed for like an ace level pitcher?
Not, I don't necessarily think it's has to be ace level, but I think that it has to be a starting pitcher.
Okay.
I know that
So would you put Casas in the deal for Crochet?
No.
Neither would I. Okay, good. What about you, Adam?
maybe. I mean, no, yeah, I think you guys are probably right though. Like it's just Crochet is just such an unknown at this point.
Mhm.
He could be Cinderella turning back into a pumpkin kind of thing next year. So I guess that's probably not what you want. But I think that a lot of I wonder what reliable starters will be on the market to trade. Um, you know, I know that there's some talk of like, the Twins and like maybe like Ober or something, but
I don't hate that. I don't know if that's Triston Casas worthy, but I don't hate that. That's definitely like the Wilyer Abreu territory in my book.
you mean our Gold Glover?
Our Gold Glover, yes. I think Wilyer is as good as gone this offseason. And I'm a big fan of Wilyer. I wish that he could stay, but I think that especially if you bring in Juan Soto, they're not trading Duran, even though I wrote a piece that advocated for trading Duran. They're not trading Rafaela, especially after just signing the extension. I think Willier's the odd man out.
I, okay. I mean, I personally, of the outfielders we have right now, I think I think I might like Abreu the best.
Oh, I'm right there with you. Like
But
Abreu is my favorite outfielder that we have currently on the roster.
yeah, I mean, I think, all respect to your article, but I do think that they should not trade Duran.
I'd trade him
But
today. Sell while it's hot.
but but yeah, I mean, yeah, I guess you're right. I forgot about the extension for Rafaela, so that does kind of take him out of the mix.
I mean, there's
And
something to be said for a cost controlled young, potentially platinum glove caliber center fielder. There's value there. But I don't know because there's such a huge hole in his swing.
mhm,
I mean, you're not going to get back. You could throw him in a deal for Crochet, but I don't think that he's going to be the centerpiece of a deal for Crochet. Whereas I think that Abreu, even though the reports have come out over the last week that maybe Abreu's not going to be the centerpiece for a deal for Crochet, I think that makes the most sense because, like you said, we really don't know what Garrett Crochet is going to be. He may be an ace level caliber starter for the next however many years, or in 2 years, he might be right back in the bullpen.
which I mean, for the Red Sox, not the worst
That's not
thing. You could
terrible. Yeah.
also use bullpen help, but
Right.
yeah, I get it. If you're trading a prospect or at least someone who was a rookie this year, you want someone who's going to be a long-term starter. I just I guess the other things that you've been hearing are maybe a trade to the Marlins. You're talking about the Marlins starters, but all of the Marlins starters, I mean, most of the guys that you would actually want from the Marlins were all injured last year.
Absolutely.
So, maybe you take Edward Cabrera and he had like a 4 ERA or something last year over, 20 odd starts,
And hope the Bailey
maybe,
lab can figure it out.
yeah, exactly. And maybe, yeah, if he throws, if he throws a slider, 80% of the time, maybe it gets better. But, Yuri Perez and, Alcantara, both of them, you're not going to be, both of them are just such big question marks. I don't know if you trade a
Even Jesus Luzardo
prospect.
at this point, I think, is a pretty big question mark. He was a name that was attached to the Red Sox pretty heavily last winter, and even right there at the trade deadline. But I don't know if you'd be willing to give up a Triston Casas, who's rumored who the Marlins wanted in that deal. I wouldn't give up Triston Casas for Jesus Luzardo. I really think the only team that I would trade Casas to, outside of for Vladimir Guerrero Jr., is the Seattle Mariners. I think that let's workshop the idea that Devers, we've signed a Bregman to play third or a Damas to play third, and Devers is moving to first. That guarantees Casas is gone. A trade to the Mariners, I think, makes the most sense for that because they have a ton of young pitching, which they've also gone on record as saying they're not going to trade. But I think that if you built a deal around Triston Casas and maybe a Marcelo Meyer, and you included, oh, David Sandlin again. I'll keep bringing him up. He's a pitcher that I think is going to
This
get traded
poor
this
guy.
offseason. I know
I
he
hope he doesn't listen because he's
profiles.
gonna get a complex.
I mean, he can hit me up and we can talk about it. I like him. I like his stuff. But I really think that he profiles as the type of pitcher that is close enough to the MLB that most teams will feel comfortable taking him on because they can see him as somebody to call up towards that, playoff deadline, somebody to add to the roster at that point, kind of like we did with Richard Fitz or Quinn Priester. We've got a couple of pitchers that we are comfortable rolling out in September. And I think that Sandlin could be kind of that piece for us. He's not nearly as big of a name as Quinn Priester was in the Pirates system, but the ceiling is there for like a number two starter. And if a team believes in that pretty heavily, I think that that's a name that you could see a lot this winter. I think he makes a lot of sense. I think Quinn Priester makes a lot of sense in a deal to potentially Seattle.
I just don't know who I see Seattle giving up from that rotation. I mean, they've talked about being hesitant about trading, any of their pitchers. And so, I think Castillo and maybe Wu are probably the only two guys that
I
they would
wouldn't give up Casas
trade.
for either one of them. Wu has a lot of upside, and I like Castillo, but I would much rather have Casas and his potential 40 homer power at first base than either one of them if that's what it's going to cost.
Yeah, and I mean, look, Castillo is a younger man than I, but he is still sort of older on the older side. So
Mm-hmm.
like it does make me nervous thinking about, trading for him and
Man, he's
then
younger than me. I wish you hadn't said that. Oh, man.
and like I said, he's younger than me. So I mean,
Or
it's
at least we're in this boat together.
we are, but it's still like he's not, I think you're going to end up seeing Casas be you would end up seeing Casas be a great Mariner for much longer than you would end up having Castillo be a decent Red Sox pitcher.
Absolutely.
Wu, on the other hand, he's young, but he's also unproven. So it's sort of, you know, do you take a chance on him and hope that he has the upside?
I think it's the crochet conversation all over again. You like what you see, but are you comfortable giving up, like I said, a likely 40 homer first baseman to take a flyer on Brian Wu.
Right. I
I
think
don't.
Wu has a little bit more of a track record of like pitching innings
Yes.
than,
Yep.
Crochet. Like Crochet, I think the thing that worries me the most about him isn't the stuff because he was always a good bullpen piece. It's more the fact that like, is he going to be able to like actually pitch an entire season in the starting rotation,
Yeah. Absolutely.
And he got through it this year, but who knows what the toll is going to be next year.
Well, I mean, he made some pretty. I don't want to call him serious, but when his name got brought up pretty heavily on the trade market right there at the trade deadline, it was you're going to re-sign me, like you're going to sign me to an extension. I will not sign an extension if you are not making the postseason. I am going to protect my arm. Like, it's very like as a young pitcher in the majors, like I feel like that has to rub people the wrong way. And good for him for advocating for himself, but I can see a front office being like, "Hey, you're not going to come in here and start telling me what I'm going to do with my team. Like you're brand new to this and I've been here for a while."
I mean, millionaires do tend to hate that, so I can imagine
Right?
that not going great
But what
over.
about billionaires, Adam? What do you think they think about that?
Look, I can't put myself in that mindset. Millionaires, I can stretch my imagination that far. Billionaires, can't do it. But yeah, I mean, yeah, I agree with you. It was when I heard it, I was like, wow, good for him, like to say that
Mhm.
because you hear so much about like James Harden in the NBA. They kind of have like a similar conversation with him, like if he's not, playing hard in the playoffs because he's not getting like paid as much for each playoff game kind of thing.
Mhm.
And to have someone like Garrett Crochet really advocating for himself that way, I was like, wow, that's impressive.
Absolutely. Yeah.
But I do think it super hurt him.
Yeah.
He probably would have been moved if not for
I
that.
think
But
that's the sole reason he was not traded at the deadline.
yeah, now I kind of wonder like exactly the same thing. We talk about how the Red Sox have been stingy in the past, and maybe now they're willing to open up the purse strings a little bit, but are they enough to take on someone who's willing to advocate for himself in that way? I don't know. That
I
could be a
feel
step
like
too
I feel
far.
like that's the type of personality that Theo would like. And so that kind of leads me to a question I just thought of right before I said that. Do you think that Theo being back on board in some capacity and ownership is the reason we are suddenly talking about what it's going to take to be back in the World Series conversation and let's spend money? Because I mean, Theo wasn't around in the 18-19. That was obviously Dave Dombrowski, but Theo was not shy about handing out contracts either. So do you think that we might be stepping back into the Dave Dombrowski era of spending in Boston? And if so, do you think that part of the reason is because Theo is back in some capacity?
Yes and no. I think part of what spurred the Red Sox to want to spend again was the Netflix documentary.
Mm-hmm.
Um, just some of the old interviews with John Henry. I like to think that maybe he thought, "Wow, what am I doing right now?"
Remember
Like
when this was fun?
exactly. And yeah, I think it was that, and maybe Theo a little. But Fenway Sports Group owns so many sports conglomerates.
Mm-hmm.
So I thought he said in an interview that he had his hands tied up with the PGA team or something that they bought last year.
Something like that. And he's been linked to their soccer club as well. I know he spent some time over there dealing with that front office as well.
Cora was just at the Liverpool game on
Yes.
Sunday.
Yeah.
That was cute. So maybe part of that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to think that Theo is some sort of like GM whisperer, but I'm not positive that's it. I mean, maybe there's a chance that having Theo back has kind of reminded, Fenway Sports Group of what it was like to win and like that it was fun and stuff. And I mean, so maybe that has something to do with it, but yeah, personally, I'm not sure how much I believe that Theo is really, talking baseball all the time with them. Although, I mean, Theo was a Yale guy, Breslow's a Yale guy.
They're
They
both
might,
incredibly intelligent. I'm sure they
yeah,
speak a different language that none of us understand when they actually speak to each other.
well, I mean, okay, I'm from Connecticut and I do know a fair amount about New Haven pizza. So I think that there's a good chance that I could have a very intelligent conversation with them about that. But, besides that, maybe that's all they want. Maybe they're just like, we got to win again so we can get the New Haven pizza delivered to Boston.
Do you think that the fact that the richest teams in baseball were just in the World Series has any bearing on this? A year removed from the Diamondbacks and Rangers being in the World Series. I put some
The
stock into
Ti-
that.
yes, and the Tigers and the Guardians were also pretty close to making the World Series.
Absolutely.
So you can also argue that other teams with different mindsets can go very far.
I just, one of the things is that I was it Theo who like kind of originally was the one who said something about like how once a team wins a World Series, like everyone else tries to copy them kind of thing.
Uh huh.
I believe that about so much of the like roster building, construction kind of things, but I don't believe it with spending.
That
I
makes
think
sense.
I think there's a chance that they look at this and they're like, well, they didn't need all that starting pitching. They mostly did it with bullpen and then try to, make a super bullpen. I think that's what most front offices end up, trying to glean
Mm,
from the Dodgers rather than like, hey, it pays to really like spend a lot of money kind of thing. You
right.
know, that just tends to be like they want to believe that anything except money is what actually wins.
Yeah.
It pays to be the smartest people in the room, not to spend the most money. So I don't think that has something to do with it. I think maybe, getting booed every time they're out in public, maybe that has something more to do with it.
It's probably the sole reason the Devers extension happened was John Henry getting booed at the Bruins game.
Yeah, I mean, it would have been great if we had booed him earlier.
Mm-hmm.
But we get what we can get, I guess. So yeah, I think that is the kind of pressure that more than cave to than just like, oh, the Dodgers won by spending money. That's so
Right.
new, because I mean that's how the '90s Yankees worked, and it wasn't like it
That
didn't
didn't take over the
spur,
sport then either.
yeah, it didn't spur us to do anything really. So
I do think that the Dodgers model is showing that you're going to be competitive, you're going to have to spend money. It's not going to be multiple $700 million contracts. Like it's not that if the Dodgers assemble the Avengers in LA, like that's a problem. But I don't, and this is a totally different conversation with the deferred money and everything. But I think that what it has shown us is that, and we'll tie this all back to Juan Soto, you're going to have to spend money on star players to be able to play with the big boys at this point. Because when you're facing a lineup of Mookie Betts, Freddie Freeman, Shohei Ohtani, you're going to have to be able to put runs on the board. And if that means paying Juan Soto $700 million to come play in Boston to hit with Rafael Devers and Jaron Duran and Triston Casas, I think that's something that you have to do. Or otherwise, we are looking at, was it Mookie that said the next 7 years is how long everybody's going to have to wait to win a World Series title? I don't think that's hyperbole if teams are not willing to shell out this kind of money to bring at least one star player to your roster that you can build around. I think for the Red Sox, it has to be Juan Soto.
it's an interesting question because the idea of competing against the Dodgers you know, I think you have to wonder, like,
I mean, they're hamstrung in 10 years. They will have
yeah,
nobody.
oh, definitely. But also, it's just, you know, the Yankees were not going to be the team because of their starting pitching. If Cole wasn't going to win games, then it was kind of like, okay, well, who else what are we going to lean on?
Right.
I think the Dodgers got very lucky by how well their
That
bullpen
is the
performed.
matchup they wanted.
Yeah, yeah, I think it is too, but it's also sort of iffy to say like that's like, oh, we definitely wanted the Yankees or
Yeah,
the
because it could have
team.
ended poorly for them. But I,
Yeah.
I think that when they looked at the AL, I think that the Yankees were the team that they absolutely wanted to play because they knew that they matched up almost perfectly. Now you don't factor in Shohei, you know, having a bum arm because of a slide and of essentially becoming a non-factor outside of the fact that you're still having to pitch to Shohei Ohtani. But I do. I think to play with the big boys, you've got to spend money in the modern day MLB. And if the new CBA wants to address that, if they want to talk about deferred money, if they want to do all of that, that's great. But as long as we're under this one, if you're not spending, I realistically don't think that you are going to play as deep into the postseason as you want to.
And I think like it's also worth, you know, thinking about defense. I think one of the biggest reasons that the Dodgers wanted to play the Yankees and one of the biggest reasons the Yankees didn't win is because their defense was not very good.
No.
um, this is not going to come as news to Red Sox fans, but the Red Sox defense has not been very good for kind of a while now.
Mm-hmm.
So, like I think that there does need to be kind of a balance of spending of, obviously you need to put runs on the board, but you also need to stop runs from getting on the board. And
Absolutely.
easier way than, somehow assembling, five Garrett Coles is by playing good defense.
Mm-hmm.
I think that was, I mean, another rumor that I guess we can touch on is there was some rumor about the Red Sox maybe being a landing spot for Nolan Arenado, which, I originally when I heard Devers moving to first, that was kind of my original thought was like, oh, maybe the Arenado thing is actually like true, like as a
Right.
landing spot, because that would definitely help the defense a lot, having, a guy like him who maybe doesn't hit quite as well as he used to, but, is still one of the best defensive third basemen out there. So, I mean, I could see us moving in that direction too, but I guess that's what makes the Soto thing so interesting is that despite him being nominated for a Golden Glove, he's
It's
not
not
exactly
legitimate.
a real Golden Glove contender. He's no Wilyer Brady, let's just say that.
No, absolutely. You brought up the Arenado thing, and I think that's interesting because I live in Cardinal country. And so I go to a handful of Cardinal games every year. And so I've seen Arenado in person over the last few years. And when my wife and we went to 3 or 4 games this year, it was a noticeable decline in the bat. Like sitting in the stands, I won't say he looked lost because I don't want to insult Nolan Arenado, but I don't think there's any way that the bat rebounds at this point. And I don't know unless the Cardinals are willing to eat a ton of that contract that they're already not eating a whole lot of because the Rockies are. Um, I don't know if he makes sense to come to Boston just because, yeah, like you said, like it's a Gold Glove caliber third baseman, and that's great. But man, it's a hole in the lineup all of a sudden. And I like Nolan Arenado. I was stoked that the Cardinals got him because I could go see him in person. But I don't know if there's a whole lot of meat left on that bone at this point.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I haven't seen a lot of Cardinals games, so I will defer to you on that point.
I had a friend propose Triston Casas for Sonny Gray straight up a couple of days ago. And I laughed audibly, like you could hear it down the hallway. And I like Sonny Gray. Sonny Gray is not a big market pitcher. Yes, the Cardinals are probably going to trade him, but not to Boston, please.
Yeah, I mean, I'm constantly surprised at how young Sonny Gray is because he's
Yes,
just been around forever. But like he started so young that you're always kind of like, really? He's not 40 yet somehow.
right. I
Like,
wanted him to come to Boston years
yeah,
ago, but it's just no.
I was gonna say
He
maybe straight from the Athletics. You wanted him to
yeah,
come to Boston, or any one of the many stops before the Yankees. Then kind of the Yankees happened, and you were like, oh, okay, well,
yeah,
maybe this isn't the right environment for him. But yeah, no, tell your friend that all of us GMs are against that one.
yeah, absolutely. So we were talking defense. Do you think that the Dustin Pedroia injury was kind of the death knell for the Red Sox defense?
Yes.
Because that's really when it. Okay, Maddie, I was about to say because that's really when it nosedived.
Yeah, there's definitely a correlation, like a before he was injured than after, because they really haven't filled second base since May. And I know the Mookie curse gets brought up a lot in
Mm-hmm.
conversation, but I think the Dustin Pedroia curse at second base should be more relevant.
I really
I
like
think
that you called it that. Yes.
that's affected the team more than the Mookie Betts trade because we now have one of the best outfields in the league,
Mm-hmm.
and we can't say the same about our infield.
Yeah, and it's also not the first time we've had one of the best outfields in the league since Pedroia got hurt, and yet our defense, our infield defense especially, has been crap for quite a while, even while having three center fielders basically roaming the outfield.
Right.
I've honestly, I have never thought of it that way before. Like, you just blew my mind. But I mean, that's really interesting. Yeah, I guess so. I mean, we, yeah, it's true. Second base. The Red Sox have had many great second basemen, but not really since Pedroia have we even had a decent one. You know,
Trevor Story was the
I
last
was
one
gonna
that I
say,
would
yeah, I was gonna
say.
say Trevor Story was the best second baseman we've had in a long time, and that's just because he couldn't play shortstop for that season.
Right. And I think there's an argument to be made to maybe sign Adamas and shift Story back to second.
Yeah,
But
I would love it. That would be, I mean, that in my mind, that's the ideal scenario. But I think that it's like just enough of a step down defensively that I think the Red Sox don't want to do it because it makes the Story contract look, just a little bit worse. If
yeah,
it's like we signed him to be the shortstop of the future, and now he is the second baseman who barely played the first 2 years of his contract.
right.
you
And
know,
there might be an argument there that shifting him to second can help maybe keep him on the field because he's not making as many of those super athletic plays like the dives to the left and the right. Like it's going to happen because you're on the infield, but that shoulder injury in Anaheim, LA, whatever, was terrifying looking at the beginning of the season when he dove for that ball. And
yeah.
had he been at second base, you realistically are maybe looking at David Hamilton there, who probably doesn't even try to make that play. Um, Maybe that's an argument that you can make that softens the blow of that contract and the move to second, but I don't think that that's an idea they would even entertain moving him to second right now. I think that they see Story as somebody who can mentor Marcelo Meyer, Christian Campbell when they do make it to the big leagues. And if he's still currently playing shortstop and maybe Meyer's playing second for a season or Campbell's playing second, but they're the heir apparent to Trevor Story at shortstop, there's really nobody else I'd rather learn from than somebody like a Trevor Story, who has been one of the most reliable shortstops until he signed with the Red Sox.
Maybe that is why it's a curse. I didn't think about that, but maybe it is
Because he played second.
maybe it's a curse. Maybe Pedroia did curse the second base position somehow for us. I never thought about that.
It's like the defense against the dark arts position in Harry Potter.
I mean, yeah, yeah. And I mean, I just wrote a whole article about Pedroia's, Hall of Fame candidacy since he's appearing on the ballot for the
I'm
first
so
time
glad you brought
this
that
year.
up.
And and it's stark just to see like how good he was in those early years, and then
Yeah.
just like the very clean break that there is, just
Yeah.
like, oh, it stopped here and then just never came close again.
So, what are your both of your opinions on the Hall of Fame conversation with Pedroia? Obviously, not a first ballot. There's no way.
Unfortunately, I don't think it'll ever happen. Chase Utley's a good comp to him, and
Mm-hmm.
he received maybe 28% of the back or votes last year, but he beats him in basically every metric aside from
Yeah,
like World Series wins and MVP awards. So
Yeah, the only thing that, I mean, I talk a lot about Utley in my article, and yeah, that was the thing, is like, if this were the olden days where people really looked just at like what awards have you won, how many times have you been an all-star, stuff like that, then yeah, Pedroia probably is in the Hall of Fame much quicker than Utley. But at this point, you have Utley, you have, you know, even our old friend Ian Kinsler might have a better argument than Pedroia. And so, and I mean, Cano would be the best second baseman of the generation, if not
absolutely.
PED thing, that probably takes him out of the running, at least for a while, who knows. But Pedroia ends up being kind of like, you end up thinking what could have been. It's a lot like Garcia Parra in that way. It's kind of
Mm-hmm.
like the beginning of the career was just so hot, and then it just fizzled so quickly that you kind of are left with, there's like that 7 year kind of like Jaws score that
Mm-hmm.
BREF gives, and you look at it, and it doesn't even, those guys, it doesn't even look that impressive, the Jaws score, because they didn't make 7 years of like really great baseball. They ended
Yep.
up really playing more like 4 to 5 years of great baseball in a row, and then missing seasons.
I think that had the injury not happened, I think that there is a case for Pedroia to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. Um, had he continued at that level for the next 3 or 4 years.
Mhm.
And I'll caveat this: I love Dustin Pedroia. Um, he is like, if my son grows up to play baseball, that is the type of player that I hope that my son is. Um, I think that there is a shift in the BBWA where you are starting to see younger members come in because they are spending their 10 years in the profession and they are starting to vote. And I think that with that, you will start to see a shift from, well, let's look at their overall numbers, let's look at their career, to what's his peak. At any point, was he the best player at that position? And I think that if, and that's a big if, Dustin Pedroia can last into those years, which are probably 6 to 7, excuse me, years away, I think you can start to have a conversation where he squeaks on in the last couple of years of his eligibility.
Yeah, I mean, I can see it, I guess, but but Maddie was right. It's, with how little support that Utley got for his very first season, I think you have to expect Pedroia to not quite get that much. And then you're talking about Pedroia having to have one of, you know, one of the top like two or three biggest jumps of all time
Do
to
you think
get
he even
it.
gets, what is it, 5% to stay on the ballot for next
Yeah,
year?
he stays on the ballot. Like, I don't think that you can. I don't think that you can win the, rookie of the year, MVP back-to-back years like that and not stay on the first ballot if you play long enough to make the Hall of Fame ballot. It's like that is sort of unprecedented to win those two awards back to back. It hasn't happened that often, and so it at least deserves a longer look. But uh, you know, I think Scott Rowland, I forget the exact numbers. I cited it in the piece, but he had one of the biggest jumps ever from
Mm-hmm.
first ballot to making it. And Dustin Pedroia is going to need a jump like that. And uh, the unfortunate thing is, a lot of people say that like the sabermetricians are the ones who really kind of push Roland to getting into the Hall of Fame. And I just don't think that sabermetrically looking at Pedroia's numbers, you can make the same push. You know,
Nope, I don't think so.
it's going to take some sentimentality. It's going to take some, knowing the guy, knowing what he meant to the team, and then like also kind of understanding that he had a short peak, but it was a great peak, and
Mm-hmm.
I don't know if you get, someone enough voters who understand those three things in tandem.
I think he'll have his number retired by the Red Sox, but I think that that's as far as it will go.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have said that before, but the Red Sox have finally started retiring numbers of people who didn't make the Hall of Fame.
Right.
That being such a sticking point for a long time. And once that happens, yes, I think that's right. I think him and maybe Veritek or someone from those teams are probably like the two guys that you're going to see
Yeah, I
also
think so.
retired. But yeah,
Is there anything that either of you want to touch on before we wrap up here?
um, I mean, I do at some point want to talk about the golden at bat thing.
Oh, we can
That
do that. We've got a little bit of time. We can do that.
okay, if you want to touch on that, we can. I haven't read the entire golden at bat proposal. But from what I was reading, I guess just to give a little bit of background, the golden at bat rule is something that Rob Manfred apparently mentioned in a podcast that has been bandied about and was a big topic of conversation at the owners' meeting. Um, from what I read, the idea is that you can slide a player up or down the batting order to bat in a certain position once per game. Is that what you guys have gotten out of it too?
Yeah.
So I guess the argument is that this can make the Mike Trout, Shohei Ohtani at bat in the World Baseball Classic happen like every game. Every game you can come to this like crucial part and have the best versus the best. But the other thing that I read is that it can also mean that you have like Mookie Betts come up twice in a row, like
Yes.
potentially. So it feels like this hasn't been well thought out, or it has been more well thought out than that. Those details haven't leaked. So I feel very confused about it. One, and second, I can't imagine what this means for the record books. Like the record
Yeah.
books, like people who care about um the sanctity of the record books and stuff. Like I mean, this has to drive them nuts. Like even more nuts than the zombie runner rule.
Yeah.
It just seems so gimmicky and inauthentic to the game. The Yeah, in the postseason, there are a lot of times for I guess the bench players to shine,
Mm-hmm.
and you really wouldn't get that with this golden at bat rule. Like we wouldn't have Brock Holt hit for the cycle in the ALDS
Absolutely.
if this rule was implemented.
Yeah, I mean the one that came to mind was that Rajay Davis. Was it a home run for Cleveland that like took that made that World Series game go into extras. Like
Yeah.
just a
And that's
completely.
actually brought up in that article on The Athletic.
Oh, is it? Okay, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't finish the article, but like that, I mean, that moment, like a guy who has barely hit any home runs in his entire career, like the fact that he like, came through in that moment was so special. And you just kind of think about like, well, that definitely wouldn't have happened.
Right.
There were probably like, probably almost any other guy in the lineup you would have wanted to slide to that Rajay Davis spot in that case. So I don't know, like it does kind of it does feel like you'd be trading a uh, a Trout Otani moment for like the like Rudy underdog kind of
Yeah.
and I don't know if that's I mean maybe that's the way that the world is trending, but I don't know if that's exactly what baseball wants because baseball does still sort of love the underdog.
Absolutely. And I think there's something to be said for the fact that the outside of it being the WBC, the reason that Trout Otani was so special and that at bat is because it never happened before. And there's something to be said for the sentimentality of situations like that. And I did read through the whole piece, and that's something that's touched on as well. They actually interviewed Joe Madden because he wanted to interview somebody who was close to the game but was not currently in the game, so they would speak freely. And I thought that one of the two of the biggest points that he made is, and they kind of go hand in hand, is like you all had just touched on, like you take what you would consider to be the bottom of the order, the people who aren't expected to do things, who more often than not in those big situations do hit for the cycle in the postseason, like Brock Holt, or do hit the home run that sends the game into extras. It's oftentimes players that you don't expect to do that step into that moment, and you take that away from them. You effectively tell them, hey, we don't think you're good enough, so we're bringing in Juan Soto to hit for you. We're bringing in Freddie Freeman to bat twice in this inning. And I don't like that at all. And the other thing that he said while he was on the phone with him, he told him, he said, I wrote down the word team on this piece of paper because if this is what you're doing, there's no team anymore. It's about one player.
I think that is interesting because that does sort of bring up like a question of like, do managers even want this? Like it it feels like something that is good in theory, but
I think it would be
managers
awesome in the All-Star game.
yeah, but managers might actually hate in practice because you're right. It's essentially like a guy making an error in the field and you subbing him mid-inning or something. It's
Yeah.
just like it's like the quickest way to make a guy lose all of his confidence is to be like, "Oh, this is a big spot. Yeah, you can't handle this. We need to get you out of there."
When there's something to be said for a David Hamilton, Ceddanne Rafaela, who, yeah, maybe they're not going to hit that home run, but they're going to shoot the gap in right center and be on first. And within the next two pitches, they're going to steal second, which, in my opinion, is just as exciting as bringing in somebody like Rafael Devers to hopefully hit a home run.
Right. Yeah, because you're going to see because I mean, for the most part, Juan Soto aside, most home run hitters are going to either hit a home run or strike out. It's kind of like the
Right.
three outcomes thing. And then, but with a lot of the bottom of the lineup guys, you have a lot more diverse possibilities with what's
Mm-hmm.
actually going to happen. So yeah, I can see that being exciting.
And they touch on the All Star, the using it in the All Star game because apparently part of the quote was in like an exhibition format, is
Mhm.
where he sees it being used, at least first. And then he went on to say about how Fox is willing to play ball with ideas and they bring ideas. And so I think in an All Star game, where another idea they floated was you can have three of your superstars on the All Star team are able to be brought back in the later innings because that's when all of like the big name players are gone from the game. So you can bring Vladimir Guerrero back, you can bring Rafael Devers back, and you can bring Bo Bichette back, and they get to hit in the eighth inning. And I think that's an interesting idea, but solely in an exhibition format.
Yeah. I mean, I think the issue, one of the big issues is going to be that if you allowed something like that, then it's going to be like Aaron Judge versus Rafael Iglesias, like 3 games in a row.
Right.
It's just going to end up being like you're going to have your best player hitting against the other team's closer like every game,
I think it
and
would cause people to tune out, to be perfectly honest. You're going to get, as bad as I hate to say it, you're going to get bored of the big time matchups.
yeah,
I mean, there's something to be said, and this is another kind of parallel they draw in the article. Like Steph Curry always has the ball in his hand in the last minute of the game, but when he kicks to his wing and the wing makes the shot, that's talked about a whole lot more than Steph hitting another buzzer beater, than LeBron, you know, shooting the paint and dunking with the last second. Like,
Mhm.
there's so much more to be said for those role players that if the MLB were to go to something like that, like I don't have any interest in watching the last half of a game if I know that if it's anywhere close, we're going to see the same set. We're going to see the same names twice.
Mhm. Yeah,
I mean,
yeah,
I get nervous when the bottom three come up in any situation, just like every other fan.
yeah.
That's part of the game now. Is you hope that bottom three can pull through, and more times than not, those are the people who win your games. Now they might not hit the home run, but they're the ones who are hitting for average, who are getting on base, that allow Devers to shoot a ball off the monster, and they're fast enough that they score from first.
Mhm. Yeah, I agree. I I I think knowing that maybe it was talked about for All-Star game makes a lot of sense, but I do sort of wonder like who really thought that maybe this was a good like regular season thing. Like
Yeah.
I can't imagine it happening, but pre-COVID, if you told me that the zombie runner thing was gonna be a permanent
Uh-huh.
staple, I would have been like, that doesn't make any sense.
Right.
I never want that. So, just have to hold your breath
I still
there.
turn that off in the show. Play it old school. Play it
Of
old
course, of
school.
course. Yeah, and I mean, I think it would be another one of those things where, like the zombie runner, like it sounds like one of those things that would in the playoffs they would be like, okay, but we can't do it in the playoffs,
Yeah. Yeah.
which makes it just seem like it's like, okay, if it's not good enough for the playoffs, why would it be good enough for the regular season? So yeah, I don't think baseball is going to change that much, but only time will tell. I mean, the game is going to evolve, but probably not like that. I hope.
I hope not. I really hope not. Maddie, do you have any kind of final thoughts? Any topic that you think we need to talk about real quick?
No, I'm good.
I apologize for trying to trade away Triston Casas to like 3 different teams. I know that you love him.
No worries. It's all good. If it happens, I'm out.
Maddie's a Chicago White Sox fan now.
Yeah, wherever he ends up.
I mean, he's gonna be a goat no matter where he is, So
Yeah.
exactly.
And I think that my kind of final thought, my last words are sign Juan Soto. That I've, as much as I try to tell myself, don't pay attention to the things, I have to believe that where there's smoke, there's fire. And I think it was a Lou Merlone who was like, it's not smoke, it's vape. I'll take it. it I'll take the end of a cigarette burning in an ashtray at the bar if that's what it's going to be to sign him. I think that Juan Soto makes too much sense for the Boston Red Sox if they're willing to spend money.
Yeah, I mean, amen. That's what I'll say.
Well,
Juan Soto or
hopefully,
bust.
yes, Juan Soto or bust. Let's go. Let's put that on the record. Now he's not going to sign in like 2 episodes from now. People will be like, you guys are absolute idiots. But I will say that I think the only way we lose the offseason, Soto or not, is if we don't sign starting pitching. If we do not sign a top tier starting pitcher, that is how we lose the offseason.
Do you mean like sign or trade for, or you think we need to sign?
I think we need to sign Max Fried. Blake
Okay.
Snell is off the market. I think that a winning offseason begins with signing Max Fried.
Okay.
And if a trade for somebody like Crochet is in the works, great. But I don't know if there's anybody available on the trade market that would move the needle for me as much as Max Fried would. And that would show me as a fan that, yeah, we're actually serious about this now.
Okay. Yeah, I guess I agree.
All right. Well, hopefully you all have enjoyed the first episode of the Talk Sox podcast. We don't really know a set recording schedule. We're going to work on that. Um, we're here in the holiday season, so that could kind of, space them out a little bit. But I'm sure with the winter meetings being next week, we'll come in hot and heavy with hopefully Juan Soto on the next episode of the Talk Sox podcast.
All right.